Thank you, Lexi. That was beautiful. Well, welcome to Unity Church of Ames. If you're a newcomer, don't see any here, but anyway, if you are, the chaplain for today is Liz White, though I don't see her here, but there'll be somebody there. So she had a busy weekend, I guess, being on the board and going to Cedar Rapids and everything. But after church, please join us for coffee and treats in our community room, which is right up there and up those steps back there. And we always get acquainted there, and we have a lot of fun just talking with each other, getting acquainted. Thank you, Sally. You do an awesome job. Okay, let's take a moment for prayer. Holy Spirit, as we enter into this time of prayer, we remember Jesus' words, "Peace be still." We now call forth this same tranquility into our own hearts and minds, and we immediately become calm. We let go of worry, fears, and doubt. We are confident and clear about what is ours to do and proceed with divine understanding. We realize our worth and claim our good. We allow God's blessings to flow to us. Guided and nourished by Spirit, we continue to grow in spiritual understanding. And for this we say, thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. As we say the Unity Worldwide Affirmation and the Unity of Ames Affirmation, I invite you to think of them as a prayer and holding them in collective intention. Please join me in saying Unity Worldwide Affirmation. Together, there is one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotent. And the Unity of Ames Affirmation, together, through the Christ Spirit in us, we create a better church and a better world. So be it. Okay, we are. And Mark Barrett is going to read our daily word today.
Daily word for today, spiritual seeker. I'm continually evolving as a spiritual seeker. When I hunger for satisfaction or feel uncertain of who I am or what I should be doing, I turn to God, the source of my fulfillment. I explore my divine nature by deepening my awareness of God within through prayer and meditation. I'm open to new ideas as I read thought-provoking articles and books. I'm free to contemplate, accept the ideas that resonate with me, or set others aside for later consideration. This practice of exploration and reflection helps me understand who I am as a child of God. With each step I take, I discover more about myself. Every path I explore reminds me to new ideas and further expansion of my mind and soul. And from Matthew 5:6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, and Deb will have the lesson today. In the silence, I rest.
Oh, that's our redbud tree. Isn't that beautiful? Liz Laurie took that picture. Woohoo! In the silence, I rest. Don't go to sleep, though, okay? And I'll try not to either. When my kids were little, and you needed them to settle down, we played a game called batteries in, batteries out, right? So when you had the batteries in, they could be wild and make as much noise as possible, and then I called batteries out. And they all had to just, like the Energizer Bunny, right? So this morning I got here and I felt like batteries out. I said, Charlene, do you see a place back there you can stick a battery in? We had an awesome time down in, over in Cedar Rapids. It was wonderful. Martha Creek was our retreat leader, and she was teaching us about ourselves and healthy congregations. And one of the things she said was healthy congregations play together, pray together, and eat together. Well, we're pretty good at the eating together, don't you think? I think we do that really well, and we've been praying together a lot. And at the retreat, we will play together and pray together. So the other thing she said was that in healthy congregations, former board members stick around. They're not burned out and exhausted and fed up. So I'm really glad you're here today. And Jim and Nancy are in Colorado, so they're taking their annual trip out to Colorado. If you are interested, there are Martha Creek Talks, Volume 1. So if you want to listen to her and you want one of these, she's just giving them away, so please help yourself. And Sally, I have a joke for you. It's a groaner. I mean, I've just got to rise to the occasion, don't I? There was a monk who entered the monastery, and it was a monk, silence was their rule of the order. And at the end of the first year, they were allowed to say 2 words. So at the end of the first year, the monk was called into the head monk, and he said, "Bed hard." At the end of the second year, he came in again, and he sat in front of the abbot, and he said, "Food bad." And then another year went by, and he came in again, and he sat down, and he said, "I quit." And the abbot said, "Well, I'm not surprised. You've been doing nothing but complaining since you got here." I had to share that after your groaners. I think Sally's prepping to do the talk one of these days. Don't you think so? Yeah. You'll have a whole 20 minutes of groaners. I think it would be a perfect Sunday to come to church. So we had a wonderful time. I want to give you a flavor of this. On Friday night, Martha started by saying, "In the beginning, there was the conclusion." Now, if you think about it, isn't that how we start, right? In the beginning, there was the conclusion. And then we look for evidence to support all of our conclusions. It really began to stir us up and awaken us and make us think outside of our normal boxes, our normal perceptions of things. It was very worthwhile. Your board is a hard-working board. Give them a round of applause. Susan got us a 13-passenger van. We all piled in. We headed over to Cedar Rapids. We missed Sherry, couldn't come along for health reasons, but we're so glad to see you today. And rumor has it that Larry will be here next week. At least he told me he wanted to be here next week. And I haven't heard from Elaine yet. I'm going to call her today. So, all right. It was a wonderful time, and we learned a lot, and we connected. And I felt proud of us and grateful for all of you, because I think we are a healthy congregation. And I celebrate that, because they aren't all healthy. And I think we are. And at least all the seeds have been planted in the right place. So, woohoo. On task. This is what happens when I get really tired. I just wander off task, but we'll get back to the silence. Because this month we're exploring the experience of the silence and the stillness. And they're not the same. The silence and the stillness. As I reflected on this silence business and the stillness, I realized that while much of Unity is focused on affirmative prayer and healing, and that's what I'm talking about in my interview, as Myrtle demonstrated it. There's a huge part of unity that's grounded in the silence. And that part actually came more from Charles than from Myrtle. Over a 2-year period, you know the story that Myrtle healed herself from tuberculosis by using positive prayers and affirmations. And Charles just watched this happening. He was not a particularly spiritual or religious man at that point. He was just watching her use this affirmation. And he was very scientific and methodical in how he thought about things. So as Myrtle, over a 2-year period, gradually got better, he wanted to understand what this spiritual cure was all about. And he was very curious about that. And he set out to explore how religion might have played a part in her healing process. Charles grew up in St. Cloud, Minnesota, very close to an Indian reservation, and had dealings with the Native Americans. They saw him as a very spiritual being. But he hadn't really ever attended a formal church or been instructed in any religious teachings. So he went about researching that and discovered the dogmas and the creeds and those kinds of things that were present in mainstream religion in the 19th century and still can be, and it clearly wasn't going to work for him. Wasn't going to work for him. There's a famous line in his writings, maybe you've heard it before. He said, if there's anything to this, if there's anything at all to this, then I ought to be able to just go to headquarters. Go directly to headquarters to make a connection with God. So that's what he did. And that was really pretty radical in 1888. Think about 1888 and what they didn't have. And he sat in the silence for an hour every night from 9 o'clock to 10 p.m. There wasn't TV, there was no Doc Martin to distract him, there was no internet, there wasn't, I don't even know if everybody had telephones back then yet. So he was sitting in their parlor at 9th and Tracy in downtown Kansas City in the silence, just sitting there, making a place, making a space in his heart, in his consciousness. And it was like a radical idea, the psalmist, be patient and wait upon the Lord. That's what he was doing. He was a businessman at the time. He didn't have a mentor or a guru, teacher. There was no Charles Fillmore to explain to him what was happening. He just took, it was like a pioneering journey inward, which is can be a scary place to go. But he went there. And then he just observed what happened. Began noticing what was happening in his life. It was inner exploration. And it began to have outer consequences. He wasn't doing it so he could write a book about it and get on Oprah, right? In fact, he didn't write a book till many years later. Christian Healing was the first one, and he wouldn't write that until he had made a demonstration of the truth of every chapter in that book. His reasoning about this was that if there's anything about this spirituality, it ought to make its presence known. And he made room for it. And as he did that, he began to notice subtle changes. He began to have an intuitive sense of what his customers wanted and needed. He began to have a skill at listening better, a skill at hearing what they were saying, at being present to what they were bringing to him as their needs, as their questions. And his business dealings really began to improve. He moved from financial struggles to a state of financial well-being, which was a new place because he'd always struggled financially. Now, mind you, in 1888, psychology was an emerging field. We didn't have all of the understanding or research in psychology that we have today. Not much was known about how the mind works or how the mind-body-spirit connection happens. But Charles was tapping into that, into this deep connection between mind, body, and spirit. And he began writing about it in his New Thought magazine in 1889, and then the rest is history as unity began to evolve. But its roots are resting in the silence. And I think sometimes we forget that. It's very easy to get distracted. And it's very easy to get hooked about the idea of using spiritual principles to attain something we would like to have, right? So we can be more successful or more effective. But in reality, that isn't what his intention was, and it's not our intention. What we do over time in sitting in the silence and quieting that outer voice is we reach the stillness. That place at the center of us, the stillness. What he reached, he called the Christ within. And in stilling the outer noise in the silence, then you get to that experience of that inner stillness. That's what we call the peace that passes all understanding, right? That's what we call when you connect with your intuitive knowing and you don't even know how you know, but that's what it's about. When Charles and Myrtle attended the very first Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago in 1893, they knew nothing about Hinduism, Eastern spiritual practices, Buddhism, and the meditation practices. So it was like a feast to learn about all these different spiritual practices, and they started borrowing. And they read the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, the Hindu Vedas, the Tao Te Ching, all of these different spiritual practices, which began to make sense. Because all of that is to bring you into that still point. All of those practices are ideas about how to connect with that inner stillness. And all of the wisdom words in those writings are to bring us back to that place. As humans, we have a lot of thoughts, right? We have a whole lot of thoughts, and so many of our thoughts are clamoring for our attention. Pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. Just try to meditate, right? All those thoughts, they're asking, clamoring for your attention. And what Charles is saying to us is to go to that thought beyond thought, right? That place beyond. Look beyond what your human mind keeps agitating. The place beyond our thoughts. And that's the true essence of all spiritual teachings. The intention of all of them is to take us to that place beyond what our human thinking is. That's the essence of unity, and it is in experiencing the outer silence that we can really begin to touch the inner stillness. And it's a discipline. Charles doing it for an hour every night, that's a discipline. And they gradually began inviting people to join them. That's how silent unity developed. It was the Society of Silent Help, sitting together in the silence. Our challenge and our constant dilemma is how to live in the world without being of the world. How do you live in the world and still stay connected to that inner stillness? Paul Tillich, a theologian in Protestant circles, calls it the ground of our being. Charles called it the inner Christ, the Christ within. But it's that still point. So our key is to cultivate awareness of what is happening out here without getting lost in thought about it. Right? That's a practice. That is a discipline. It's a stillness. The equivalent of external noise, like a lawnmower out there, is the internal noise of our thinking. Right? And sometimes the internal noise of thinking can be so loud that we don't even notice that it's quiet. Right? We get so lost in thought, we don't even notice when it's quiet. This past week, what I tell you is I don't just talk the talk, I kind of have to live it. And this week I got a real good example and experience doing that. Because on Wednesday, I called the Days in Cedar Rapids, right? Because I had reserved a block of rooms for us. And I wanted to tell them what our final count was and what we needed. Unity of Ames. We don't have anything here. Right? And I talked to the manager in April so we wouldn't have this problem, right? So my human self is saying, how could you not? Having to remember I'm a minister. And then she said, well, we're full because we've got the collegiate baseball tournament, right? Was in Cedar Rapids. Well, you know what kind of moment that was, right? It was a moment of silence, like, I've got 8 people loading into a van to go over here to stay somewhere all night. And then I tried to call Reverend Brenda, got her voicemail, called the church, got the church's answering machine. And I talked to the lady at the Days Inn. They're all full because of this tournament. Well, pitching a tent on the church property? I don't think so. And then there was a point at which it was like that, when you practice this, there was a moment where, okay, Deb, just get quiet. Just get quiet. And I sat there. The hot flash was finally over, right? The tension. And the word prairie popped into my mind. Prairie. Prairie Meadows, prairie what? Prairie. There is a retreat center, Prairie Woods. And I remembered, I Googled it, got it right away. How often does that happen? And then there was the phone number right there. And so I called them, and a live person answered the phone. So, okay, thank you, God. And they had openings, and they would take us. I explained, there's no room in the inn. Can you take us in? And she said, yes, of course. How many were coming, and what did we need, and how can we do this? And so it was just, and I said to her right then and there, you are answered prayer. You will never know, right? You are answered prayer. And it is that practice of sitting in the silence, God calling. Because our challenge is to stay there and to realize that all we need to do is be quiet and listen. Just be quiet and listen. Because our one tool we have is to begin to notice the pause. Take a breath and pause and notice that there is a space. Make a space. When we breathe, we are breathing into spirit. In every conversation, there's a pause somewhere. I've met people where there isn't, but most of the time, there is a pause. We run out of breath and we have to breathe. And when we breathe, we can allow that internal noise of thinking to be quiet so we can get to that place of the stillness. When there is silence, just begin to become aware of it. And pay attention to it. That's the tool that we're cultivating, to become aware of it. Cultivating it so that in every conversation, we allow space for spirit. Ruah. That's the Hebrew word for spirit. It's feminine. Ruah, the breath. How hard is it to just listen? We did an activity where one person did talking for 3 minutes about something that had them nailed. We saw this video with a person with a nail right here. In the video, this woman in the video had a nail right in the middle of her forehead. It was photoshopped in. And she was sitting across from a gentleman, and she was talking about, I've got this pain right here, and it won't go away. And he keeps trying to talk about the nail that he can see, but she can't. Right? And he's wanting to fix it. We just got to pull that sucker out. Finally, she said, I just want you to listen to me. And then he said, it really hurts, doesn't it? And then she's, yeah, you get it, you heard it. It hurts. All he needed to do was listen. So then, what Martha had us do is pair off. I loved it in her pairings. One of us always got to be the knucklehead. Right? The knucklehead, the other one got to listen. In this case, one of us could unburden ourselves of something that was our nail. That we come right to the edge of what it is I can't see, that I keep tripping over, that is causing pain for me. And the other person just sat there for 3 minutes listening, holding the space, saying nothing. It was an amazing experience. How many were listeners and did that of our board members? Everybody got a chance to do it, right? And that experience of just making a space, it was amazing to me how the person started solving their own problem just as they were talking about it and letting you listen without any advice, without anything other than listening. Wow. Silence is very powerful. And it helps take us to that place of the stillness. In the Gospel of John, Jesus teaches his followers about this. It's in John 8:31 through 33. Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now here's what they immediately said. We're descendants of Abraham, and we've never been slaves to anyone. What are you talking about? What do you mean by saying you will be made free? Silence. Right? I shouldn't be in this line. I know the Christ within. Why is this happening to me again? And Jesus is saying, if you continue in my word is be still and know, come to the center, right? To the Christ. When you come to that place, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free in the silence. Isn't the word that Jesus is saying, look beyond the words? Right? Jesus is the word, the truth, and the light, right? Look beyond the words that rattle through your brain to that place of quiet. We want to be at that place beyond our words, to the place of inner stillness. When the followers answer Jesus, it's very clear they are not making space for him, for the Christ, for silence. The true place of rest is that place of the silence that takes us to the stillness. We as humans have a myriad of emotions and experiences, some of which we like and some of which we would rather skip. Right? And when we welcome all of it, that was Martha's message. We're not here to be spiritual this weekend. We're here to be very human. We're here to let our human selves have a voice and have it be all right. Welcome all of it. That's her message. That's really Jesus' message. Because all of it serves to actually be our guide to take us to the silence. Not being able to stay at the Days Inn with all of the athletes, oh, what a blessing. Right? And instead, we were at this lovely retreat center. We had a little kitchen. We could make our own breakfast. We could hang out and talk. It was wonderful. Let the silence take you to the stillness. Welcome all of it. I'm going to end today, before we go into meditation, with a poem by Rumi, in honor of Charles's exploration of all of the Eastern religions. It's called The Guest House. Has anybody heard it? The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So let's take that into silence and let's sing into our meditation time. And it's a lovely little unity piece, Quietly. And know that when you encounter life, when there's no room at the inn, when the knuckleheads in you and the knuckleheads in your life just won't listen, when things just won't shift in the way that you want them to shift, that is the time to breathe and pause. Just breathe. And when you do that, lengthen each breath. Lengthen the in-breath in, and then let it go. Ruach. You are filling your whole being with spirit. Just keep breathing. Pause and pray. And allow yourself to settle into a silence A silence that takes you to the stillness. Just breathe into that silence. And when thoughts arise, notice them and let them pass. Notice it, let it pass. It's a cloud, let it pass. Let your awareness sink below all of those thoughts. And let your breath take you to a place beyond thought, to that stillness, at the center of your being. As we come back to this time and this place, recognize that you're only ever a breath away. Pause and pray and breathe. You're only ever just a breath away from that place of the stillness. It's always available, always there. So let us sing once together to affirm that we know that truth, and it will set us free.
With all
us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And life is fantastic. Yay, God.